Hi guys, Togo here with a new video, and this video will be a raid tier list video for World of Warcraft Classic Fresh, and this is talking about Phase 1. So I'm gonna precise Phase 1. There is also Phase 2 coming up. You could also say that it's a Phase 2 list because it doesn't really bring too much new gear. It doesn't give you too much more hit rate for a lot of the classes, for example, that really comes BWL, ZG. That's where they will get a lot of hit available, but right now it is not the case. And we're talking about all the DPS specs. We're not talking about tanks. We're not talking about healers. We're talking about purely DPS. Okay, so the list will be a bit different. You will be having S to D tier, obviously, and I already prepared every single spec that is going to be used in this tier list. I could be using Demologia Warlock, I could be also using Affliction Warlock and whatnot, but I think for Warlock, you only have one true spec, which is most likely DS Ruin, or you have also SM Ruin, which is Shadow Mastery Ruin. So you have two specs, it really depends, but mostly it is Ruin. You need the extra crit, like the extra damage on crit that you would get as a Warlock. But that aside, let's talk about a few things. First and foremost, I want to bring my own experience. So I'm a Shadow Priest, so I play as a Shadow Priest in my raids, and I'm leveling a Warrior, which is going to be most likely my main as well. We all know Warrior is going to be the best, but I'm going to give you a bit of nuance because you have Fury and you have Arms, and I'm going to separate them so you can also understand why the differences are there. And I would say two-hander or dual wield, like that's more of a horde thing. For us Alliance, it is purely dual wield. That's the meta. In horde, you have obviously the Wind Fury totem, which brings you a lot of value on those bigger two-handed crits that you could have, and slam, which is also a very big part of the rotation, for example, for horde, which in Alliance you don't really have that. Since we don't have Wind Fury. If we had Wind Fury, maybe you would see more Alliance playing with two-handed swords, because we have humans, but unfortunately it is not the case. So we have this list, kinda DPS damage statistics. I'm going to give you a few nuances, okay? Right now we are at the 25th percentile. I could do the 99, the 95 percentile, but we could do also the 99 percentile if you want to. But this is pretty much the top tier specs in the game right now. So there is no Arms Warrior. It is counted as DPS Warrior in general, and DPS Rogue is combat. We all know that as well. But basically, Warrior is the best. Then you have Rogue, which are like the two clear best, and especially Rogues that have like the bigger items, because sometimes you have Rogues with bigger items than Warriors. They will overtake Warriors to certain fights. But again, whenever a Warrior pops Recklessness, it's like unbeatable. Alright? Then you have Fire Mage, which is weird because it's MC. And MC you have Fire Resist or Fire Immunity. But you have 4 humanoids bosses that you can actually fight as a fire mage, and now you have the possibility to be fire because of dual spec, and that's actually very big. Some raids use that, some raids don't, but the difference between the DPS that you could have as a fire mage compared to a arcane frost or a frost mage is miles ahead, because you have ignite, and if you have the right itemization, you can make it work. But again, I think you're very limited because of the hit rate that you have as a mage, and because you don't have a lot of pieces that can give you hit, that can be a problem. But the few bosses that you can do that is Lucifron, Gehennas, Shazra, Sulfuron, and Majordomo Executors, I think, the mini bosses. Like, I'm not sure about Gehennas or Lucifron, I'm not sure, one of the two, but I know that some bosses you'll be able to be DPSing as a fire mage, and some bosses you cannot. So you can test if you want to. I personally don't play mage, so I don't know. I haven't seen it in my raids, but I know that from what I've seen on YouTube and on like Twitch streams, that whenever they're utilizing the dual spec into fire mage, they actually are really ahead of frost mage and arcane mage. Arcane mage, which is arcane frost, so basically they have arcane power, and then they're doing their own frostbolt rotation pretty much. But this is like fire mage. Then you have feral druid, which are very high, but it's obvious because MCP is available. You have already all the items that you need to be able to like DPS, so you are very much a high DPSer from the get-go, especially because your pre-bis is very soon your bis, and the better pieces that you would get are in later phases, which are also highly contested. You have marksmanship hunter. Personally, the difference between a very good hunter and a bad hunter is that they are utilizing melee weave. And if you have a very big two-hander, they can actually do that. Some people don't melee weave, and that's okay. It's really a tiny upgrade to the DPS, but it is an upgrade to the DPS nonetheless. If you're using it very correctly, you are going to be ahead, especially if you're hitting those juicy raptor strikes every single time you're going to do a melee weave, with then also your multi-shot and aim shot or whatever you're going to use to be able to melee weave into ranged attack, melee weave into ranged attack without a problem. Then you have Elemental Shaman and a Handsome Shaman. Those two, it's a big... I don't really know because I'm not really playing a Horde right now. From what my understanding is that Elemental Shaman right now, they have very good damage, but they do have problems with mana. But the fights are not that long in MC, so you could still be utilizing it correctly. Now, is it fantastic? I don't know. But the same as I could say about Shadow Priest, is it fantastic? I don't know as well. I generally speak about my experience. I am sometimes above Warlocks. I am sometimes above Hunters even. So I think it depends on the player, depends on the gear, and depends on the willingness to go the extra mile with consumes, for example. Then you have Frost Mage, which is, again, the discrepancies between a Frost Mage and an Arcane Mage with, like, Arcane Frost Mage is quite big itself. You have the Frost Mages that can apply Winter's Chill, and then you have the Frost Mages which are the Pumpers, for example. So again, it depends on raid per raids. Then you have your Shadow Priests, which are very close to Warlocks because Warlocks don't have the hits rating enough to be able to hit stuff. And whenever they're doing it, they have a threat problem. So if you're like critting 3 times or 4 times in a row, you're like already in a big problem situation. And Alliance has it a bit better because you have Salve, but Horde, generally speaking, they try to like slow down the DPS whenever they have too much DPS, and whenever they don't have enough DPS, it is mainly because they are not hitting. Then you have a DPS Paladin. We have a Retribution Paladin in our raid, and they are like Nightfall users. It's a Nightfall user, so it has some utility. Its DPS is not really good, but it brings 15%, so it can help in the long run. And then you have Balanced Druid, which is the lowest DPS of the bunch because the itemization is already very bad right now for Balanced Druid. It's a caster, so it becomes very good, not very good, but at least usable at CG, BWL-ish if you have enough items on Balanced Druid. But even then, it still lacks the availability to mana and the availability to actually hit stuff. So again, Balanced Druid, the lowest, and now we're going to jump into the tier list. So I have my own predispositions, and I'm going to talk first and foremost about the classes and specs I know the most because I played them in 2019, or I play them right now, or I have loads of experience with just like being able to be in touch with the people that are playing with it. So I'm going to jump straight with the bigger class. So we're already like 8 minutes in, but I wanted to do analysis with you guys and then do the tier list because again, not everyone is doing that, or at least giving you the time to do that. So Fury Warrior obviously is the S tier, and you could even say S+, it could be like even above S+, it's like to the sky, because it is one of the best classes in the game. You could stack it to 25 per raid pretty much and still be efficient and very good at it. It is obviously very tied to world buffs. If you're losing your world buffs in raids, it is what it is. You're going to still do okay or very good damage, but it's nowhere going to be to the sky, like for example some classes that don't rely too much on world buffs. But Fury Warrior, top tier for me. Then you have Rogue, which I think personally they are very close to Fury Warrior at level, like at phase 1, phase 2. Because again, now if it's 2 with Dharma, maybe it will be a bit different because of the Dharma buffs. But I do believe like Warrior, they have like the big utility, the big CDs, I would say, that they can pop to overtake Rogues whenever they want. If they pop Recklessness, and you know, there is like no way for you to come back on that. But a rogue can actually have multiple good crits and sword specialization, which if they keep on proccing, they could have a lot of damage. Now I could split dagger rogues and sword rogues, but I think it's the same for me. It's going to be A tier. I personally prefer dagger rogues because they get more gear, generally speaking. They have Perdition Blade, Good Gore Ripper, they have Corehound Tooth. So you have multiple daggers that are very usable as well from the get-go, and it's all from MC, so you're bound to actually see some daggers drop. While a sword, realistically, Brutality Blade will be going for warrior, most likely, and I would say in MC you have Viskag, which is probably the best sword that you can have right now in the game. It's between warrior or rogue. It depends. Like if you're a sword rogue, you would want that. But again, I think if you're going dagger, you will have the easier gear progression. Now, again, I understand swords is maybe more sexy for also PvP because you want to play Hemo sword rogue, which is way easier to be doing way good at any situation. You don't need to do ambushes. You don't need to do backstabs. While dagger rogue, yeah, if you're not utilizing your dagger with backstabs or ambush, well, why are you taking a dagger pretty much? But again, I think they're very close, so it's A tier for me. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Arms Warrior, from what I've seen, they are on the same level as Retribution Paladin. But that's maybe too harsh for me to say, because is it really true that Arms Warrior is below Retribution Paladin? I don't think so. I also think like Arms Warrior, you don't see them enough to actually have a big judgment about. But the only thing I see is that you don't scale very well. Your weapon damage stays to a certain degree. What you can improve every single time is your attack power, and Bloodthirst is a attack power scaler, while more Strike is only scaling on weapon damage. That's the only thing that is going to happen. Now, is it like bad? I think the rage regen is quite lower, because if you're missing, normally you should not miss, but if you're missing, it is way worse. If the boss is for some reason dodging, parrying, if you're not behind the boss or whatever, you're going to have a tough time there as well. But that's more of a difference between Fury Warrior and Arms Warrior. It is truly a C tier then for me. Because I do believe that for me it is better than a Balanced Druid or a Retribution Paladin, and even utility wise, you could always demand your Arms Warrior to be maybe off-tanking. If he has dual spec and he has the off-tank spec, why not? They can go Fury Prot, for example, without an issue. So I think also the difficulty of Arms Warrior is that actually that they need to have, if they're a horde, they could maybe utilize it with with Wind Fury, then it will be a bit better. Obviously with Sword Spec, for example, it's not possible. Like, it's possible, but most likely if you're horde, you're going to go for axes. But if you're alliance, you're going for swords. You have sword specialization. If it procs, it does feel good. But I think more Strike itself is not as flexible as Bloodthirst. Now, phase 1, phase 2, again, I think it's way closer than you would think with dual wield and Fury just in general. But for now, I'm going to put it in C tier. If you can convince me that it's higher, we can discuss about it. But I've not seen any Arms Warrior really perform well, like in Classic. At least in PvE. PvP, like, it's the best, obviously. I might make a PvP tier list really soon, because phase 2 is going to come out, and I'm a PvPer, so I might do that again. Now, the big ifs for me is like Enhancement Shaman, Elemental Shaman. I think Elemental Shaman is B tier then. That's how I see. Because they have damage, but they have like mana issues. The good thing is about Elemental Shaman, they could like off-heal pretty well, because you can have a build that is doing pretty much everything. Like a build like not with Elemental Mastery, but with Nature Swiftness. So you could have, I don't know, 30-0-21 for example. It would be okay. You could heal with that. It's not going to be the best, but like you can still like spam chain heals if you want to, and you still have your totems. So by itself, the damage is very high. It's okay. The mana is bad, but you have your utility, which is out of line, so that's why it's going to be B tier. The same for Enhancement Shaman. I think the utility brings them to C tier. The damage is not that impressive, and yes, on the damage meters statistics, you see that they are even higher than Warlock, but that's pretty much because Warlock without gear it misses too much, or it takes too much threat, so they have to backpedal on the damage. But right now, I think a C tier is a good thing to be having. So I was checking something on my screen. So C tier, very good. For me, it's actually a good, like, C tier is not, it's bad. Like, it's not great, but it is definitely the in your raids you have 40 man, so you could have an enhancement shot and not feel like a problem. And you can have nightfall users. Like, a nightfall user is not bad. If you have one in the raid, it's okay. Retribution Paladin that has nightfall is also not bad, but I'm gonna say Retribution Paladin is a D tier spec for like just raiding. Not only the damage, but also I would say that in general, you could have an arms warrior with nightfall, and it would probably perform better. That's how I see. And they can spam hamstring, right? They could do spam hamstring. They can spam Sunder Armor. Like, he could be a Sunder Armor bot, pretty much. You could also spam, like, whatever you can do with 10 rage. Like, I would say hamstring is probably the best to like get the application of nightfall. So I think it's easier to do so as an arms warrior than as a retribution paladin, but we put it on a retribution paladin because itself they don't bring too much damage. So at least they bring something, and you can then put, let's say, if you have an arms warrior, which you should not have, but if you have an arms warrior in your raid, and he wants to truly play an arms warrior, but at least he can play a bigger two-hander and maybe do more damage. With Nightfall, he will do less damage, but he will be proccing way easier than Retribution Paladin. That's how I see. Now, they have utility, but again, the same utility could be happening for a Holy Paladin, and most likely you're going to run with 4 Holy Paladins, maybe more even. It depends. So yeah, I think Retribution Paladin is not, it's harsh, man. I think I'm going to put it in C tier, I'm sorry, and then I'm going to put Arms Warrior in B tier, because the reasoning stands. I think if you have Arms Warrior with Nightfall, it could be okay. Retribution Paladin with a Nightfall is less okay, but it still has some utility, so let's put it in C tier. Now, a class that I have played in 2019, a spec that I have played in 2019 as well, but it was at BWL ZG because they asked me to go for it. Balance Druid. And Balance Druid, the 3% crit is not that big. I'm not gonna lie, 3% crit is significant if you're critting all the time. But the issue is you could also never crit, and that 3% will just be wasted. The damage itself is suboptimal because just like it doesn't do enough damage. It has good damage, but the mana doesn't follow. So you have to rank 1s, rank 2s, rank 3 Starfires, and you know that you will need a lot of spell power to compensate the damage loss that you would have, or you have to chug mana pots at every single fight. And you know, you're like popping a mana pot at Lucifron is like it's a waste, right? It's not great. So obviously I'm going to put it in D tier, and that's not for the Moon Boys to be like detesting me. Like, again, I played Balance Druid. I know how sad it is to play it. Now it's fun to be like a chicken and getting some loot because you are a Balance Druid, but realistically, if you're doing a loot console, you are going to have the pieces that nobody really wants. So it's okay. I would say in PvP you have it better, in my opinion, but right now I would never go back to raiding as a Balance Druid, except if the raid really wants me to. But then I would have to have guarantees in gear, because I'm not gonna do that for free anymore. But Balance Druid, I did it, and if I played Druid again, I would be playing Feral Druid if I have the time to do MCPs and whatnot. But the issue is with Feral Druid is that the upgrades with gear is quite boring. So like, you don't have a lot of upgrades available, and those upgrades are pretty much upgrades for any class that is not Feral Druid. So Hansa, Rogue, Fury Warriors, so they will most likely not putting it on you. So that's why for me, Feral Druid is probably going to be a no-go for me. But Feral Druid, phase 1, phase 2, I think a very good one is very close to a Rogue. I'm not gonna lie, I think people are like sleeping on it. They give crit, which is way more significant on a warrior than on a warrior, a rogue, than on 3% on a caster, because people are hitting way more as a warrior or as a rogue than as a caster. As a caster, like for example Warlock, you can give even 50% crit, he might still miss 17% of his spells. So grand scheme of things, that 50% will never be applied. But for a buff to a warrior is going to be always nice. And it has crazy DPS if you have like good management with your power shifting. If you're power shifting very well and you're using your consumes and you have your MCPs, you can actually overthrow even rogues on the meters. But you don't see a lot of feral druids actually going full commit. And that's true because it has a lot of issues with how hard it is to be committing as a feral druid. I think if you put the energy on a feral druid that much, you could put half of it on a warrior and you would perform better. That's the issue with feral druid. But the people that are very committing to it, I truly believe they are very high. Like just also in the damage as well. Like power shifting is like literally a rogue thistle-teeing every single time. That's pretty much how power shifting is. The only thing that you have difficulty with is that you don't really have weapon upgrades. You don't have like big stat sticks. So pretty much your weapon is like just a stat stick or an MCP, and that itself is not really great because you don't really scale very well, but also you don't have a lot of attack power scalers. Like for example, Rip and Rake, they don't do much for you. While in SOD they do, but in Classic they don't scale. So their damage is limited, their AP will go higher, but your damage is not going higher as much because it's not scaling as well. Well, for example, a warrior that does Bloodthirst, a Bloodthirst from phase 1 and a Bloodthirst from phase 4, the damage is crazily apart. Like it's just not in the same world. While a Shred from phase 1 from a Feral Druid and a Shred from phase 4 from Feral Druid, it will be better, obviously, but it's not going to be as much. So hopefully you do understand what I'm saying. Like phase 1, phase 2, I do believe Feral Druids, they are A tier, because I see them as a very big asset to a raid, damage wise, debuff wise, because you put Fairy Fire, so you don't need to have a Resto Druid putting a Fairy Fire on the boss. You can have a Feral Druid doing that. You have obviously Rebirth, so you have a Battle Res, which is very big, guys. Like I think people don't understand how big it is. Like if your tank is dying on the spot, you're Battle Resing it, it could be saved. And just in general, Feral Druid, the damage is really good, and it is only capped with your mana, because you can power shift through the whole mana, and then you're chugging a mana pot and you're going back. So I did Feral Druid in 2019, I liked it. They demanded me to go balance route because they wanted to test with a bigger size of classes, because in ZG and AQ mages are big, especially AQ, where fire mages you want to like buff it even more. So me as a balance druid was a good option, but I like my feral druid, and if I play druid again, if I want to commit on it, I might just play druid again. So okay, this is like pretty much we have also hunters. I think hunters, for me, it's crazy, right? For me, hunters that melee weave and they have like crazy good gear, so they have a two-hander that is like following it. Normally, if you're able to get like Ash Candy, for example, in BWL, like the two-hand, like I had Ash Candy on my hunter, right? So nobody wanted to have a two-hander because they already had like a two-hander for PvP. I had Ash Candy as a hunter. I was melee weaving, and that felt very, very good. Like it is crazy the amount of crit you can have on the Raptor Strike, and you do scale actually very well because of wall buffs, and your Raptor Strike is like full value for that. While wall buffs, I think it's like in this OD they changed it, but in Classic you don't have a lot of value in wall buffs as much as like, let's say, a warrior, for example, because it is melee attack power and not ranged attack power from my understanding. So you don't really have that much value. But hunter that melee weaves, in my opinion, is A tier, just below Feral, I would say, and B tier for the phase 2. Like I'm talking phase 1, phase 2. At the start, first week, they were S tier in my opinion, because they would like already have great damage without having gear. Now everyone got gear now, pretty much. Like if you had a bit of luck, like for example, we had Brutality Blade drop, we had Viscag drop, we had like a lot of great weapons dropping, so hunters are not going to have value with it. But hunters for me are like, if you're not melee weaving, B tier. If you're melee weaving, A tier. So the compromise I will find with it is that I will add a tier. That's how I see, because I think not everyone is doing that. I'll put it at B plus, and the F tier will be gone. F tier doesn't exist. It just is like classes. All right. So that's not a tier for the classes itself. So B plus, I think melee weave and just normally like they are like in between, like they're below feral druid in my opinion, but I think they are above shamans in general. Although this one, like, it looks closer than it is, but it is not that close. And as you may see, like even here, the statistics kind of show, and I kind of try to explain my thought process so you can also understand, like I'm not really copy pasting damage statistics, right? But like that, I'm talking about experience here. So I would say the mages, I think that's quite hard to judge, but for me, Arcane Mage is then below, but above Elemental Shaman, but below Feral Druid, and they are limited again by hit. Like once they have more hit, they are going to be literally untouchable, but right now it is limited by hit. You're not going to have hit cap for now, so obviously it's not going to be that high, but they do good damage. Like again, I would say a bad hunter and a bad mage. The bad mage will be A tier most likely, and the bad hunter is going to be lower. And the same for like the top melees. I think a bad mage does the same button press, which is frostbolt pretty much. I'm very sorry for you guys, I know, but I do like mages because they decurse, and you want mages in your raids. And they bring buffs, so I like that. I would say a frost mage are a bit lower. Frost mages, like those are the winter's chill mages, right? So winter's chill, how can I show you guys? So here I have talent. I'm gonna show you, right? Because you're going to call me crazy, but I'm not crazy, right? So if you want to have winter's chill, all right, you see here, do you see? Yeah, you see. So if you want to have winter's chill, you're going to sacrifice arcane power. You cannot have arcane power, and I'm gonna go through arcane power. Like I'm not taking the right talents. Okay, I'm not taking the right talents. You have this, which is pretty big, but I'm not taking the right talents. Okay, those are the talents I would say. Anyways, arcane power. So if you are going to play obviously frost mage, you're going to get improved frostbolt. You're going to get ice shards. Even this, like frozen targets, you're not going to freeze anyone in MC. So from my understanding, you'll take this one. What else are you going to take? Obviously this one is 6%, very big. Like this is 6% hit, which is like lower than priest, for example. Priest can have 10%. So that's why they are very performing in phase 1, phase 2 Shadow Priest compared to what you have. This is like purely a PvE build, by the way, like don't get me wrong. Again, I would say this is like the maximum you could get, right? Again, I don't know if it's the right build. Like you obviously you have cold snap, but even then, like frost spells, you don't have many frost spells. Anyways, that has a CD if you're not like going full ice barrier or ice block. But this is the build for arcane power frost mages, right? If you're going for winter chill, you're not going to get arcane power, and you're not going to get presence of mind. So obviously, it's going to deal less damage. While this is going to be the buff, so you want that because you want to crit, so you get ice shards. Right, so you want to have 10% on the enemy, so you will have a few mages with winter's chill, and most likely you will have a few mages that are playing with arcane power, which are going to be blasting in MC. So that's why for me, utility wise, it is probably like this, right? Because you want to have winter's chill. But like power wise, once winter's chill is applied, you have 10% more crit, you have arcane power on you. You're going to blast onto the enemy, like the boss, and you're going to do more damage than a frost mage. But you want to have a winter's chill bot, not really a bot, but You know what I mean. You want to have Winter Steel on the enemy, so you could do more crits, which is going to lead then into more damage for the arcane power Frost Mage, pretty much. So that is for mages. Warlocks, it is B tier. I think it is good utility. I'm not gonna lie, like you want curses, so you will have a minimum of 3 warlocks if you really want to have a good raid. You want to have, and you have mages and whatever. You want to have 3 warlocks, ideally. 4 is also very good, and they do okay damage. They do actually very good damage if they're hitting everything, they're critting everything. But that's not realistic because they don't get a lot of hit chance. For example, I'm going to give you an idea. So if you're going on to Warlock, it's going to be a long throughout videos, but I want to make you understand what I mean. Improved Shadow Bolt is very big. So you want to crit, okay? Crit is very big. You want to crit so you can have 20% more damage on your next 4 non-periodic damage sources. So all the Warlocks are going to apply it and consume it. Okay, even I as a Shadow Priest, I consume it with Mind Blast. Okay, and that's actually very good. Like Mind Blast, this is like making me crit for 2k on a 1.5 second cost. So it's very decent. Like it's very good. Then you have obviously Bane. I would say Cataclysm, I think, but I think Cataclysm as well. Not sure. So you have this. Am I missing anything? You have Ruin. Okay. That is your build, and then you have like Demonology, which is like stopping at Demonic Sacrifice, or you're going Affliction and you have Shadow Mastery. This is only for Affliction spells, okay? So you have no hit chance on Destruction, and you have no hit chance on Demonology Warlock, and the only hit chance you can have is from Affliction spells. And Affliction spells, what are they? They are pretty much Corruption, Agony, Fear, Drain Life, Drain Mana. Those are Affliction spells. It is not applied to Shadow Bolt. So the only way to get 10% hit rating just via talents is through Affliction, and that only counts for Corruption, Agony, your curses, those things, which is not bad actually. But that's why people, generally speaking, they pick this. If they want to put a few dots on the bosses to have a bit more damage, but it's really minimum. And if you're not hitting your dots, so imagine you're resisting on your dots, that is a huge DPS loss. Okay, so you have to reapply it again. So it's not that great, and the boss might just die before the duration of your Corruption or Agony. So it's not that good, but you have more stamina if you're going for Demonology. For example, you could have, I don't know, this doesn't really matter too much. Then you have Fell Domination if you want to. Why not? It actually doesn't really matter what you're taking here. What you really want is actually this, because it will be able to sacrifice Succubus. If you sacrifice Succubus, you have 15% more damage on your shadow spells, and that itself is too big to just like throw it away. But also, in general, you could then decide to put more points on Destruction or put more points into Affliction. You can have, like, for example, a instant Corruption, so you could still have the benefit of Corruption. You could have improved life tap, for example, to get more mana from the amount of health you're losing, so that's also quite big. Or you can put more points into Destruction to have 30 points. You can do that as well if you want to. For example, Intensity, imagine, like, not Intensity, excuse me, you're not taking that, but for example, if you're like in a Q phase and you want to tank, you're going to most likely have improved Searing Ping because you want to have the crits, and that's it, pretty much. You could have more damage on improved Immolate if you want to. You can have a lot of the things that are good for Warlocks, you can always take them. For example, Shadow Burn, why not? Because it's shadow damage, you can also use that in MC. The damage is not impressive, but it's still there. You have a good idea of the amount of damage you can do, obviously, but yeah, this is like the build. So this is like the better build if you want to deal damage. If you want to deal damage with a few dots and you want to do maybe a bit of PvP, this is actually very good. If you're going 30-0-21, it's actually a very good PvP build. Not the best, in my opinion. I think Soul Link is better, but I think in general, if you want to like PvP and PvE, you don't want to use your dual spec with it, you can safely go for SM Ruin. You can do that. So SM Ruin, Shadow Mastery Ruin, or DS Ruin, which is Demonic Sacrifice Ruin. How do I know that all? Because I played Warlock back in the day. I played Warlock also in 2019, not my main because I already did it back in the day, and I play also on retail. So I played Cataclysm, I played Rider of the Lich King, I played TBC, I played Mist of Pandaria. I played everything as a Warlock, so I kind of know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Warlock. So, now the biggest mind-blowing thing. Shadow Priest. So I'm going to delete the classes. It is the last one. Where am I going to put Shadow Priest? Well, Shadow Priest, in my opinion, is just above Destruction Warlock. Ruin Warlock. You could also say that probably Arms Warrior is a bit higher than Shadow Priest. I think Shadow Priest has more value than Warlock at the beginning, because I would say more value is like relative. Again, it depends. Warlocks have the utility because of curses, obviously, okay? And they have the curses. You have to have curses. Your curse of wreck, and you have curse of elements, and then you have also the other one. I don't even know the name anymore. But those are important curses for the damage of the whole raid. So you want to buff the physical damage dealers, you want to buff the Warlocks and Shadow Priest and Boomies, you want to buff the Mages, obviously. Those three. And the Elemental Shamans, I guess. But the idea behind it is that Shadow Priest buffs the Warlocks to the point where they can actually overtake Shadow Priest in raids. Without that, Shadow Priest is actually like dealing significant damage. Just the mana just doesn't follow. Your Mind Blast, your Mind Flay, and your Shadow Word Pain has great damage and just consistency as well because of one thing I'm going to show you again. This stance, which is Shadow Focus. You have 10% hit chance directly, purely through talents on a super far, like it's literally like this. So either you play Spirit Tap, I play Blackout because whatever, I don't need the Spirit thing because you're not like gaining any experience, so you're not going to get Spirit Tap. But Shadow Focus, 10%. That's like literally 10 talent points and you already are where you want to be. And then you have a bit of hits, for example, your belt, your neck, and boom, you have 12 to 13% already at phase 1. Phase 2 will be even more with Dharma. If you're not missing, or if you're not resisting as much, you're dealing more damage. What the Warlocks have problems are the threat, but if you are alliance, that's okay. But they are mostly also resisting a lot of stuff. So that's why they are limited to the DPS, and that's why I personally, again, people may hate it, I don't care, just play Shadow Priest in your raid and you will see that the performance is not bad. It's very boss dependent. For example, Rag kind of sucks for Shadow Priest because they have lower range on Mind Flay. That's the issue. And also the mana is really annoying, so longer fights they are not really doing well. But you have fights where they're doing okay. So for example, I'm going to show you my logs. Again, it's not fantastic. I don't have best gear ever, but I have logs here, which again, the DPS is not great, okay? You could replace me with a warrior and most likely it will be better. But Baron Geddon, 94 pass, which is not best, but like it is what it is. I'm like rank 35, 445 DPS. You have a lot of like classes that do a lot less at Baron Geddon because they are like melee, so they have to get away, or they are resisting a lot of stuff, like for example Warlock. Lucifron, it's like a dispel race, so it is not really that big. It's not that important to the DPS. You could like multi-dot on those three and then you can do some damage as well. But you see that I do very bad at Shazra, for example, because the fights are very short, so I don't even have time to have a full value Shadow Word Pain, for example. And Ragnaros, what is the problem? Because the fight is too long. And Majordome Executus, you have too many targets, which again, in turn, Shadow Word Pain doesn't have value, and you don't have the mana to multi-dot. So the value of a Shadow Priest is also lying in the fact that you can also off-heal, you can also have your Fear Wards, for example, since obviously I am a dwarf, so I can Fear Ward everyone. But anyways, this is like kind of an example of why I think Shadow Priest is not bad in raids. With better gear, you might be higher than me, most likely. If you also flask, for example, you would be higher than me because I don't flask. It costs way too much for the throughput I do anyways as Shadow Priest. Or people take me because of shadow weaving, not really because of my DPS. If I do more DPS, that's good, but it's not really. I'm not really there for that. But I do believe Shadow Priests are higher than Warlock. Now phase 3, it's most likely like this, right? And then phase 4. And then phase 5, you really need a Warlock in your AQ groups, right? But for now, I keep it like this. What do you find? What do you think about the tier list? Again, I try to explain every single thing in my mind. I do believe like it depends really about gear and willingness to consume and willingness to go the extra mile. But if you're doing that, I do believe that it is quite accurate, my tier list. Maybe you're going to be saying that I'm wrong. Please do let me know. This is really phase 1, phase 2, guys. Don't tell me about BWL gear or AQ gear or whatever. This is like phase 1 and beginning of phase 2, because literally phase 2, there are a few things that can change. But I'm not going to make another tier list again for phase 2. I will do a phase 2 tier list for PvP though, so that will happen. If you want to have another tier list or explanation or whatever, please let me know as well. I know some people may say, oh, no, we're crazy, man, Mage is B+, okay, how dare you, it's the best cost in the game, it should be S tier with Warrior. Realistically, you're there as a Mage because you can actually decurse. Because if Warriors could decurse, you would have a 40-man raid. If they could actually dispel, like magic effects, you would not even like run anything other than Warrior and Paladin and Priest, I would say, and then maybe Shaman. For Horde, they would run like all Shamans pretty much. But I think really, realistically, Warrior is very good. So you cannot really compare it with a Mage. And Mage, I think, phase 1, phase 2, they lack the hit. They lack just the amount of damage that you could have with a lot of spell power. So that will happen in later phases, but right now I do believe PE Plus is actually a good indication of the powers of casters in phase 1, phase 2. The better gear is at BWL and AQ and ZG, so your time will come, but phase 1, phase 2, melees, melees, melees.